Hey everyone, welcome to the channel and another Energon Universe discussion video. Today, we're looking at Transformers number 6, the issue that closes the first arc of the fledgling Skybound series. And this is a banger of an issue, chock full of fun action as well as thoughtful character moments. After the surprise reveal of Devastator at the end of issue number 5, I think it was clear that the Autobots would have their work cut out for them in their quest to retake the arc. And that plot thread consumes the entirety of this issue, but there's quite a bit of stuff that happens during this pivotal showdown between the Autobots and Decepticons, one thing in particular that I never would have seen coming, and that surprising turn is what I want to focus most on in regards to the story, but I'll still touch on some of the other story components as well as some of the other standout moments later on. So let's jump in, and to put it simply, the Autobots get completely wrecked by Devastator, as should be expected, I think. And this leads to a sequence that contains something that was maybe expected, or at least foreshadowed, as the series was explicitly setting it up pretty early on, as well as something much more unexpected. But, and this is something I really enjoyed here, the unexpected thing was fully set up in equal measure also from the get-go, but in more subtle ways, in my opinion. First, the expected thing, the potential death of Optimus Prime. And I say expected, but that doesn't mean that the expectations or the foreshadowing weren't complicated. In previous videos, I mentioned that it seemed like they were really hinting at the Autobots losing Optimus, but that it seemed way too early to even start considering a major death like that, which, in hindsight, perhaps Johnson's speedy and ruthless efficiency in killing off characters was to subtly establish that it's not too soon for such a thing to happen. I don't know. Regardless, we get what is arguably the most nostalgia-chasing bit of the series so far, with Optimus on his apparent deathbed with injuries too severe to be repaired, a straight-up repurposing of the Prime You Can't Die line, and the big guy even attempts to pass on the drained Matrix to anyone who will take it. It's all very much in service to the highly memorable and apparently traumatizing scene from the 1986 animated movie, which, as an aside, I was never that broken up about the death of the character. Is that a controversial thing to say? It was an affecting scene, to be sure. I definitely felt things. But I think even at that young age, it created an appreciation and expectation for those kinds of dramatic, affecting scenes, as well as stories where characters simply weren't safe. I'm not saying there's a direct through line in my media preferences from the '86 movie to something like HBO's 6 Feet Under, but I'm not saying it either. But I digress. The stuff with Prime ends up being a fake-out for the unexpected thing here. Sparkplug sacrificing himself to save Optimus and give the Autobots a fighting chance against Devastator. And I never, ever would have guessed that it would happen the way that it did, with Sparkplug stepping into and literally becoming one with the Matrix, apparently rejuvenating the artifact itself, as well as giving Optimus a much-needed power boost that allows him to gain an edge over the Decepticons, ultimately using Devastator's mass and momentum against him. I'm sure the decision to use Sparky and the Matrix in this way will not be to everyone's tastes. Everyone has different expectations for how certain things should work based on prior experience with existing fiction and all. The way I look at it is that the Matrix has always been a MacGuffin and a plot device with nebulously defined in-universe rules. So what matters most to me is how a plot device is used in service of the story, not if it's used in the way I expect it to be used, if that makes sense. Johnson had already shown a willingness to use the Matrix in unconventional ways by having Optimus open it in order to restore power to a hospital, which, again, in retrospect, seems like it was maybe paving the way for this moment with Sparkplug. As it stands, this moment serves the story in a way I find extremely satisfying and meaningful. Surprisingly enough, Sparky was given the most complete character arc across these first 6 issues. He goes from a self-destructive, abrasive character with a tendency to make a mess of things to a thoughtful, measured, self-sacrificing hero over the course of these 6 issues. He starts off the series with his flaws pretty much overshadowing everything else. We see his very poor interactions with his son and friend Davey, as well as a regrettable response to the Autobot-Decepticon conflict in mobilizing a militia, which results in his son being critically wounded. But then we start to see another side to the character, one who is intelligent, competent, innovative, and observant. That last one is important here, I think. It's subtle, but Sparky notices things in this series. He pays attention. It's what helped the Autobots secure a source of energy at the Farmingham Dam, where, if you remember, Wheeljack gave Sparky's intellect a shout-out last issue, and I think Sparkplug paying attention and deeply absorbing previous conversations, specifically to how Optimus and Ratchet talked about the Matrix in previous issues, is maybe what inspires him to take the risk he does. But I don't know, maybe I'm reading too much into it. It's possible. But what makes this moment the most satisfying and meaningful to me is not just that it seems to have been sneakily planned and set up throughout this arc, but that it ties into being a kid growing up with Transformers in a way that took me off guard, to be honest. Optimus Prime is often considered to be a father figure, the dad of the Autobots, if you will, and whatever your real-life situation, whether he reflected the father you had or the father you wished you had, I think that aspect of the character really resonated with those of us who grew up with Peter Cullen's Optimus Prime. It certainly resonated with me, speaking for myself. Cullen really drove that aspect of Prime home with his performance, and if there's one thing this series has become known for, it's for how well Johnson channels that particular Optimus Prime, which is probably why he leaves a nice little thank you for Peter Cullen at the end. To me, Sparkplug's sacrifice to power up the Matrix and save Optimus highlights a simple truth about the character of Optimus Prime. That is that our real-life fathers are the heart and soul of this fictional character. This is approached literally in this book, as Sparkplug becoming one with the Matrix gives Optimus Prime his power. The fact that Prime is a robot and turns into a truck is what sells the toys, but the character endures because he's a conduit for our relationships and experiences with our fathers, whether good, bad, complicated, or even non-existent. And personally, I'm someone who had a complicated relationship with my dad, and sadly, I lost him a few years ago. And this issue impacted me in a way that I didn't see coming. It really took me by surprise, to be honest, but I think it still would have resonated with me even under different circumstances because of what the character of Optimus Prime means and symbolizes to me. And yeah, it's all very meta and circular because Sparkplug is also a fictional character, an imperfect father figure who gives power to and inspires a larger-than-life fictional father figure. But it's worth noting, in the context of this story, Sparky is only able to muster the courage to do this because he himself was inspired and given the strength to be a better version of himself thanks to Optimus Prime. I feel like there's an additional layer of meaning there, as those of us who grew up with the character age and become fathers, the legacy of these characters continue to stick with us and impact us. I don't have children myself, but I can recognize that cycle and a sort of chain of influence, and I think it's really effective and well done, playing into the history of the series and the mythology of its central character, but also really sticking the landing with how hard the series has been hitting the theme of family. But again, maybe I'm reading too much into this. You'll have to let me know if you think that I am, but that's why this choice really landed for me. Only speaking for myself here. So yeah, there's that whole thing. Forgive me for spending such a large chunk of time on that, and hopefully you got something out of it. But let's quickly take a look at some other stuff in this issue. However you feel about my interpretation of Sparkplug's sacrifice, his actions contribute to a sense of closure with this first arc of Transformers. I wasn't expecting such a clearly defined ending, if I'm being honest. I thought this issue would just roll right into the next. And don't get me wrong, the door is definitely left open for future stories, but I was impressed at how complete this arc feels, something that I think can sometimes be a rarity with an ongoing series. It feels like we just finished a multi-part pilot for a cartoon that the creators weren't sure would get picked up, telling a satisfying story, but leaving things open for future episodes. And there are some cool Transformers nods here beyond the ones I mentioned with the Death of Optimus fake out, like this panel of RC and Jazz shooting upwards towards Devastator, which reminds me of the opening to the G1 cartoon as well as the promotional artwork for the movie. Probably coincidental, but it's still cool nonetheless. And of course, there's this clever bit of lettering that says "You know the song," seemingly inviting you to soundtrack The Touch from the '86 animated movie, playing over Optimus turning things around in this issue, to the point of having the same amount of words and syllables as the opening lyrics, "You Got the Touch." There are some nice character moments that are worth bringing up, and they're cool simply in the context of this issue as well as for what they may potentially lead to in future stories. I enjoyed Cliffjumper passing up the opportunity to take revenge on Starscream, only for Carly to be put in immediate danger of being squished. That Carly-Cliffjumper pairing continues to be one of the highlights of this series, in my opinion, even when the duo butt heads like they do on this particular issue. Carly's understandably disappointed that Cliffjumper let Starscream live, and it seems likely this will come up again, and I'm here for it. Compelling character dynamics aren't solely about the power of friendship, after all. Speaking of things that will likely come up again, Thundercracker repeats Starscream's lie about the Autobots mutilating Skywarp. The Seeker is really out to avenge his fellow Decepticon, and I know someday that's really going to take a turn when Thundercracker learns the truth, and I can't wait to see what happens there when Starscream finally gets his just desserts. There's one sequence in particular that had some of my favorite art in this issue, and it's when Optimus attempts to strike up a truce with Soundwave. I like the way these panels look in general, but I really dig the ambiguity with the imagery. Is Soundwave taking a moment to consider the implication of Prime's offer in regards to overall quality of life, as well as to how the Autobots would likely value his fallen feline friend more than Starscream? Or is he reflecting on what Optimus did to Ravage in issue 1, which hardens his resolve against making peace with the Autobots? Or both? And the shot of Soundwave looking back as Thundercracker carries him off is just, mwah, chef's kiss. And the next panel, with Optimus standing on the Ark, watching him go, makes it a chef's kiss times 2. I love this panel. It just looks great. Just a really cool image of Optimus standing on the Ark. And of course, I have to mention the double splash vertical bit where you have to turn the book, the second time that this has happened in the series so far. Interestingly enough, the first time was in the first issue when the Autobots had to retreat and give up the Ark, and it happens again with the decisive action that helps them retake the Ark. Interesting. Closing the loop. This image is awesome. This is one of those splashes where you can see Johnson put a lot of thought and effort into all the finer details. I dig all the greebles and battle damage here. It's nice stuff. Oh, and how about that last panel with Spike holding up the notepad that reads, "Where's my dad?" God, this issue was devastating, pun intended. I am loving this series, and I can't wait to see what's coming next. Very excited for the second arc, especially since it sounds like we might be going back to Cybertron. Ooh. But that's all I've got on this one. How are you feeling about this first arc now that it's over and done with? Looking forward to the next one, starting with issue number 7. Drop me a comment, like, subscribe, and so forth. As always, thank you for watching this video. Hope you got something out of it. Have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.